All right, hello everyone, and welcome back. That was a great stream from Jen showing the endgame screen. Here I am in the Infinite OBS window. Looks like the chat is showing right. Let me know if the music sounds okay. I just have a playlist of random music from One Deck Dungeon going. And let me know if that all sounds okay while I'm working. So we're pretty excited to be showing you how we're building the One Deck Dungeon phone UI that is coming out next month. And it's still well in progress, and so we wanted to show you a bit of how it's put together. If you're not familiar, actually, I'm going to save this layout. Portrait, well, call it that. If you're not familiar with how One Deck Dungeon looks in the regular landscape view, I'll pull it up here in Unity. So in the game view, this is the typical layout here of the game. Whoops, I'll just run it here so you can see it in action. We've got most of the action happening in the middle of the screen, and then information about the heroes on the left. If you have a second hero, they'll be below here, and what we call the utility panel on the right hand side that has all sorts of different stuff, potions, the hourglass, level information, the general supply, all sorts of bits and pieces go over there. But your main action, placing dice, rolling dice, working with doors, claiming loot, the sort of main part of the game is in the middle. And that's intentional because we want the, where your focus is going to be at the middle of the screen, and we want that to be where the most important stuff is. And then we have a few bits and pieces down at the bottom, but all this middle part is, related to the gameplay, the main part of the gameplay. And so how do we translate this over to a phone where, if you look at this and you want to, okay, let's say we're going to put it on a phone in widescreen. What does that look like? Well, it looks like that. Really tiny. You can't read anything. Everything is really small to move around. Sure, you could try zooming stuff up, but there's a lot of stuff to show on the screen, right? Like this is a sort of the start of a game kind of situation where you only have one skill, but you could have 6 or 7 skills and 4 potions or whatever and lots of dice. So landscape just wouldn't cut it, even on a bigger phone. And so we don't want to, make a just sort of cheap and easy way to do it. We want to do it right, just like we did with Sentinels. We didn't just try to throw the game into landscape on your phone. We made a really good portrait UI. And so, whether it's portrait or landscape isn't a huge deal, but we find if we can make a game in portrait, it's much more natural to play a game on your phone in portrait. You can play it with one hand, you can play it while you're riding the subway. You don't need to use both hands for a game where basically you just need one finger to play this game, right? Like you're just dragging and dropping stuff. You don't need to have a FPS controls or something like that. So let's pop into the portrait version of the scene. So this is similar to, I don't know if we've done the dev stream of how Sentinel's portrait is set up, but it's similar here where we have different, we have the scenes for the game and the different screens. Each scene is a different screen. We have some extra scenes that are for the animations. And so what we're doing is just having a portrait version of those scenes. So we're still, most of the code underlying is the same, but it's connecting, rearranging the scene as you saw in Jennifer's stream. It has the same elements. They're just put in different places, and maybe there's a button to pop them up or that sort of thing, as opposed to them always being on the screen. And that's exactly what we have here too. So I'm going to, I have this split up between scene and game here, so it's easier to have a bigger inspector panel and stuff. So if we zoom way out on this, you can see the white bar here is where the actual screen is. And so the screen is just, this. But we have actually a scroll view where all the other elements you can scroll to, and they're still, they exist in the scene, and you can go in between them. So there's the heroes over here. If there's two heroes, there'll be 2 pages, and then the main area of the game, and then 2 utility panels, because it all doesn't fit on one screen, especially if you have a lot of potions. We might potentially rearrange that, but for right now, that's what we're looking at doing. Still very much in development, as you can see. And another big addition we've made for phone is this navigation bar at the bottom, where you can quickly tap to get across to the different screens, and it also shows you, on the main screen, there's some pretty important information like how many cards are left in the deck, how many potion tokens do you have. We might show like how much damage you have on the heroes. Right now we don't do that because we're still figuring out, does it make sense to do that? And is there, enough room to show damage and poison, for example, in this tiny, tiny space on a phone screen? So that's something we're considering. But you can see here, so we're popping right into this encounter again. And you can see we've got everything sort of set up just on this screen where you've got your dice here. This actually is going to be, this was bigger, and I think there's some changes made. It's gone smaller again, so we need to update that. And the other screens, you can see, you can swipe between them, or you can hit the buttons just as well. So one thing I'm going to look into today is making some adjustments on some of these UI elements to line them up, and also potentially look into some other playability and usability issues that we're working on. So you can drag and drop the dice. That's fine. You can see if you drag the screen, the dice stay where they are, and that's actually not trivial because of the way the game works. If you look at, we can pop into the 3D mode. Oh, can I? That button is like over over there. I can make this full screen, can't I? Where's the little thing that lets me toggle the... Is that not... I don't understand. Oh, maybe... Oh, that's just in the scene view. Right, okay, it's not in the game view, obviously. I'm used to having both going at the same time. So in the scene, if I break this open, you can see, oh, there's the dice. The dice are actually not near the UI. The UI is like this layer over here. But due to the magic of cameras, there's the UI, and the dice are, over here, but there's a camera looking at the dice, right? That's in the right spot. But we want to make sure if you're not careful, dragging this scroll view, the dice aren't going to move, right? The dice are just going to stay where they are on the screen, and so we need to hook into and say, when you move that scroll view, also move the dice so that it looks like they're attached to the screen, but really they're not. You can see when I drag this, the position of the camera of the dice is changing because of that code. So you can drag and drop dice, and also, in similar, like in the reverse thing is when I'm dragging the dice, I turn off the scroll view so you don't also drag the scroll view around, right? So that drag and drop and all that stuff is working great. One thing that we don't have in here yet is using skills. I mean, you can always click on a skill to use it. That's fine. But what about dragging dice to these skills, right? I want to drag a die over to cleave, and I can't because it hits the edge of the screen, and we have logic to keep stuff from going off the edge of the screen. So that's something we need to look into maybe a little bit today. As well as how to use your heroic feat. If it's over there, we want to pop it up on the screen and let you use it right away instead of having to swipe over. So those kind of things are the kind of usability things that you come across on a phone where you have limited real estate, whereas on a big screen or even an iPad, you don't have those kinds of issues because you have enough space on the screen to do whatever you want. So let's start looking at. One thing is, let's make these boxes bigger, because if you saw in the preview, the boxes were bigger, but we had to make some lower level changes to adjust how that works. And so they've gone a little small again. So let's get that fixed up. Let's look at the canvas. So yeah, so we can see the so you can see the root panel here is the scroll view that has everything, and the content panel inside of it is what has the different elements. So I want to look at the main panel and the encounter panel. That's this whole area, and the enemy panel is this part, and you can see that there's different parts of it with the background image and everything, and this all gets populated when we run the game. It actually configures that panel with whatever enemy or peril or boss is there. I'm going to open this up a little bigger. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so maybe no one's saying anything. Say hello if you're listening, if you can hear me. All right. So, I'll wait and see if I get any message. Maybe my streamer is not working. Oh, Jen says hello. Okay, good. Always a little paranoid when the chat's so quiet. I know it's the middle of the day, so it's usually a little less busy. So you can see this enemy panel has been set up with the beetle. We don't have an image on the screen because there's not really room for it in phone version. It pops up when you're entering in, and I can show that in a bit, and then it flips over. You can always bring up the full card if you want to look at that. And one thing we're trying, we haven't totally decided yet, is having the cards show up sideways, and then you can turn your phone to read them. We'll see if we want to do that or have like another mechanism, but that's something I wanted to try and see if we like it, and we'll see how that goes for cards that go sideways like that. Cool. So yeah, so if we look at card panel, challenge view. So the challenge view here is, if I go back to the scene, is this place here with all the challenge boxes in it, and then there's basically a row. There's a row with the boxes in it, and so what we want to do is make these bigger, and not just by like scaling. So one thing you could do is just be like, oh, I want to make it bigger. I'll just make it like 2 times bigger, which, technically it works, but it can cause other issues, especially if other animations are working with that element or things that need to know like where it is on the screen and stuff. So we like to use to actually set it up with the Unity values here, as opposed to just throwing a scale onto it. Tends to be a little more robust. And so that's what we're going to do is set these things up to be a little bit bigger, and then make those adjustments in there. So so here we want this enemy panel. It is going to the right space there, but we want these parts to be a little bigger. And this thing actually, this needs to be tied to the bottom of the screen so that it snugs up to that, but that's something I'll adjust later, probably. So let's look at getting this background image. Yeah, right now, with the phone, I want this to be like right to the edge of the screen, right? Like I don't want this to be having a decorative border. There's not enough space on the screen on the phone for that to be, we don't really have enough room to be clever about that. So let's move this over to the edge too. Maybe we'll even go, to like 20. I honestly might want this to go right to the edge, right? Like, just like that. Let's see how that looks if we populate it. Like, basically, have it just be completely to the edge of the screen. And that's, and then the boxes can be as big as they possibly can be. That's what I'm potentially looking at doing. I think for now, maybe we'll leave the Chrome in. Oops. My full screen went away. There we go. So let's leave it with the Chrome a little bit, but potentially we'll be changing that. And so we have some room to make this bigger now. And so we want this to be, basically across ways. And if I want, I can undo all these changes and keep things percentage-wise the same. I have a hotkey command that will change things to make something be like a little more it'll change it to be based on the anchors, and then I can reverse that. So let's make the, oh yeah, but that's not going to work right. That's fine. I'll undo that. I want, oh, that doesn't undo, does it? All right. I never ended up making any changes. I can just reload. Unfortunately, that hotkey command doesn't support undo, which it probably should. I should probably improve that to do that. Cool. So yeah. So the enemy panel. Let's just do it this way, because you'll see more stuff getting done. So let's make this go across, and then it's probably going to need to be a little higher as well. And then let's make the this panel. Yeah, unfortunately, this card panel is not inside the background image, which is why it's not. I mean, it certainly could be. I don't know why it's not. There might be a reason in the code why it's not inside that. That's something that I could do to, like, this could be inside here instead of being outside. Then it can be, you know, related to the other thing. So we can say, you know, this is, oops, I didn't want to do quite that. This is filling the space. Yeah, like make the anchors related to filling the space. So, you know, we want it to be 20 from each side and whatnot. And then when we move this, the other thing moves with it. And it's probably not like that because we were, you know, setting it up to be exactly how the size we want it to be and so on. But I think this is okay to do this way. And then the dungeon panel, again, should be inside there. So let's do that. Oops. Yeah, inside the BG image. And yeah, so this actually, yeah, let's tie this to the right side and let's tie that to the left side. And then we'll say the dungeon panel is also 20 off, 20 off, 20 off, and then the width will be, you know, whatever the width needs to be to line up properly. So we'll say 200 for now, and we'll it can be a little tricky because we can throw stuff into these and see you know, what we end up with at runtime. But the way it lines up the challenge boxes is actually a little tricky. So let's see what we get. So we're going to get these lined up in a different spot now, but they're going to have some empty space because the boxes aren't as big. And so, yeah, you can see that the dungeon ones are a little stretched out because of the way they line up, but we're actually going to make them taller, so they should return to being square. So yeah, so let's look at, basically we want to have bigger challenge boxes here. So, and I think what we can do that, if you look at the prefabs, you can see we have prefabs for the challenge boxes, and they have a, you know, a certain size. And what we can do is, yeah, these are all set up to be able to change size dynamically. So we can make these, yeah, they're not all 100% dynamic, but we can make them so. Just change the width and height of them for a portrait. So, and we also, let's see, so we have there's the row view that it puts them into. Yeah, sorry, it's been a while since I looked at this stuff. We've got, yeah, there's the faux box row. I think it makes rows though. Let me, yeah, that's the faux box row, then has the challenge boxes inside. So you can see there's the effect. And you know, these are like set up with a certain size, and we want to adjust that for portrait. And then we've got we've got the row here, and then it just has a layout group that lays these out automatically. So so we can say, if we make this taller, we can have it expand these. They're not expanding, but they should expand. Yeah, they'll expand if I want them to. Right, but this is not getting wide enough. So if I make this like wider and then I expand the children, then you can see we're starting to get bigger boxes, which is what we want. So we're going to want those to be, a certain size, and we can do some math to figure that out. We basically have like 540 across, and 540 across divided by basically 5 boxes across, because you're going to have 3 on this and 2 from the dungeon. So 540 divided by 5 is 108. So each box should be like 108 by 108. So let's see what that looks like. We'll make that 108. We'll make that 108 times 3. And yeah, and we'll make sure to expand the things. So you can see we have a much bigger area on the screen, especially on a phone screen. It looks a little big, but we need, we want a bigger area for that. And we can do the same thing for this. Expand those. And you can see that's getting to the size that we're looking for. I'm just gonna like expand these out to see how it looks. This is just at runtime. This isn't saving anything, but this is getting more towards what I'm looking for. And then it's still like, using those native values, so it's not going to cause problems when we're animating and stuff like that. And so looks like we need to be a little bit bigger. Let's say this, this is going to be 108 times 2, right? Because it's got 2 of those. But then, that's if we're 108 is if we're exactly snug to the edge. So, if this is at 0, I don't know why they're off to the left a little bit. For some reason they're off to the left, but I think 108 is maybe a little too big because we want them to be there to be a little bit of space. So let's say we'll say they're just 100 by 100, and then we'll have a little room to do stuff. Yeah, so then this would need to be 300. Whoop. And let's try out having 100 by 100. Right, so actually, this needs to be 300 by 100. And that makes the math easy, doesn't it? 300 by 100, adjust those things. 300 by 100. And the dungeon would be 200. We'll give it a little offset. Yeah, that's actually starting to look really nice, I think. What do you think in the chat? And not simply scaling gives us a little more flexibility to make some adjustments too. So so we might want to like say the dungeon panel maybe instead of -20, it's at like -15, or snugs in a little bit more to the right hand side there, maybe at -10, and the card panel at 10. Then we get a little bit of separation, and that's looking pretty nice. One thing we want to do is like we need to adjust this how the dice fit, and that happens in this. There's like a property in here that says how do you scale the dice. Normally it scales them down, but here we're going to scale them up a little bit bigger probably. Yeah, like actually just a 1 fits in perfectly. So So that's something that we adjust as well. So so what have we got here? We decided, I think we're pretty happy with 100 by 100 for a challenge box size. In the landscape, there's 65 by 65. I think that's the native value of them, based on the layout for landscape. But here on phone, the pixel size it's not necessarily a pixel size. It's more in relative to the screen resolution. So we have sort of a virtual screen resolution we use on portrait of 540 across, 960 tall, whereas on landscape the reference resolution is 1024 by 768, and so that's 65 sort of in that context and 100 in the other context. Is a survivor box a pixel smaller than the 3 dice boxes below 1 pixel? There is a space up here because this panel is actually I didn't move them. They're a little too tight to the top. So if I adjust this and make this 10 shorter, because this was 330, right? So everything was just a little off. So if I do this and set these up to be 10 off the side, I had them 20 off the side, right? Oh, going left to right, that might just be the image. Yeah, it's just you can look in the scene view, you can see it's just a factor of the shading of the image that it might be. Yeah, that's just the images that we have for those, and I think it's just an artifact of that. So, but yeah, optical illusion, but you can see it's sort of, since they're sort of rough looking, they have that look to them a little bit, and it's sort of, you look at the side of them and they aren't like a perfect line because of the shading of the box there. But that's something you won't really notice too much, I think, on device, and we'd have to update those images to avoid that. So that's looking pretty good. So I think it's looking like basically trying to maximize these means having a border of 10 around the edge and 100 by 100. We could, if you look, we got a little space here if we want. I believe on landscape there's a hole there, but I'm just trying to think of what that looks like on landscape. I think there's a little gap, and I think it's good to have a little gap to separate the dungeon from the challenge box, so I'm okay with that. You could see, based on the size of that gap, maybe it's like we could go to 101 probably, or 102 for the challenge boxes, but that's not going to make a big difference. And so I think this is probably going to work nicely. And it's looking good to me. So this label's popping up a little bit. That's probably something we need to adjust on the prefab to make it sit lower on that wide box. So let's look at changing that to, so now I'm going to stop this, and that's going to get rid of all my changes, but now we know what we're doing, so we can go and apply them again. All right, so making changes in play mode is nice, but you lose all them. There are some plugins you can get to apply those changes, but since we're working with prefab, it's not really a thing anyways, right? So we're going with exactly 300. This is going to make the math super easy. So, and this is 10 off there, 10 there, 10 there, and I think the whole thing needs to be 320. Oh wait, that's the wrong. Is it? No, it's this background image thing. This needs to be 320, which is 300 for the boxes and then 20 for padding. All right, so I'm going to save the scene. And so how are we going to make those challenge boxes the right size on portrait? They just come in and get put into the layout, right? So let's look and see what the code is doing. We could make different prefabs for portrait, but I don't think that's probably going to be necessary, because I think they're going to be like basically the same, except for having a different width and height and a different die scale. So I'm pretty okay with just changing those in code as opposed to making a whole new, basically copying and pasting this whole prefab just to change 2 values. As I think like a little overkill. But then you want to make a change to the challenge box. for everything, then you need to do it multiple times. So I want to avoid doing that. So let's, and the same thing for the rows and so on. So let's go and look in the code and see where that stuff is getting set up. That's going to be in the challenge view script. So you can see this script is what's referencing all those. It's in charge of instantiating those prefabs and everything. So I'm going to double click this and actually maybe increase the font size a little so you can see. And yeah, I did not do a lot of preparation for this. So this is more of a day in the life dev stream as opposed to a marketing dev stream, but that's okay. All right, so in this code, usually we have a method like configure, and we pass it in an object from the game engine, controller, model object usually, and then it will like set itself up based on that. So here this is setting up based on that thing. So it's adding the effect view. That's that first row that you see there. And then we're adding the challenge boxes. This is if it's a foe. If it's a peril, we have a little bit of different logic there to lay out perils. We'll see how that looks when we go back in. And then there's also the boss, which is another slightly different layout, right? And we have peril option views that we'll need to deal with as well. So this add boxes and rows method is what gets used basically to say, go through each row and go through all the challenge boxes. In the engine, the engine doesn't really care like how the layout is, but we need to know like we only have 3 boxes on each row, or with a multi-box we need to count that as 2, that sort of thing. And so we do that. So when we're adding each one, we call this add box method. I'm sort of drilling down to like, where do I need to change these values, right? So we go down to add box here, and here we're deciding to find out which prefab we use, 2x1 or 1x1. We create it, we configure it. So let's see, maybe that's the place where we want to do. Here in the actual UI for the challenge box view itself, so you can see here there's some logic talking about that 65. We might need to adjust that. So in configure, we're creating the icons and updating the labels and stuff. So I think in here is where this size factor here is probably going to be updated because we're not going to be, this is based on that 65 idea, but that's going to be different in portrait. I think the row prefab is what is actually controlling that height, right? If we go back to the scene, it's using a layout groups, which is really nice to use in Unity to, like we could use a layout group for this dungeon versus other thing, and we use it for a lot of things where, especially where it's a dynamic amount of things, and it'll lay them out for you, so you don't need to like manually put them in. So for this challenge view here, it's got a vertical layout group, which is just going to say, put everything inside here, one on top of the other, and then the each row has a horizontal layout group that says, for everything inside me, put it out, one after the other. Right, and so these things are controlling their own height, and that's what I think we need to make these expand to fill the space. We're not doing that, like we could actually do it here. We could say, these should expand to fill the space, but that doesn't work properly in some situations. Actually, I don't know why I think that doesn't work properly with perils. I think that's why we don't do that. I thought we are, if I go back to the code here, I thought we are doing that here. Let me see. It's a foe. Oh, if adjust layout settings. Well, maybe we can say, or if it's, I wonder if that's, there's probably some reason why it's not doing that. Or it might be just that we didn't I mean, that's used on the card view, I think. We could try turning that on for this and see. But I feel like it might be an issue with perils for this, but yeah, so turning that on makes this automatically basically say, expand these to fill the space. So then they're going to automatically try to be try to expand to a nice size. And so that's cool. You can see that these dice are not filling those because the die scale is wrong. And that's one thing where I think in the challenge box view, we can say, and we've got this die scale, die target. Place die scale is, it has a default value. I think what we'll add is a place die scale portrait and, default it to 1. And if we're in portrait, we're going to use this one. If we're not, we'll use that one. So let's find where this gets used and we'll update it. And we can update any other places where that causes a problem, because I'm sure that will cause some issues. But yeah, so there's a few places where we use that. And so, yeah, I'm going to actually add a little method to get that, based on the screen size. So let's just add a little method here. Public float get placed die scale. So this is going to return the right thing based on whether we're in portrait or not. We have a little helper to ask about that. And I'm not going to rename this because that will break the connection in Unity to all the other ones. So, so instead of using this directly, we will, oh, this is, I see, this is already implemented. So let's not call it that. We'll say, ooh, what do we call this? Right, so what this is doing is, this get placed die scale is, actually what we can do is like, make it an override, because this is saying whenever we're in a challenge box, if it's a big challenge box, then we make the dice small, right? So you can put many in there. So let's make this virtual. And so it's going to return that value, but then since challenge box view is a subclass, it can override it. And then we can say, call the base method first and then modify it. Cool, so then this is going to use that method. This is going to use the method. And this is going to use the method. Cool. All right, so let's go back, and then our dice should fit in the challenge boxes there properly. And we'll see about that. Have a good dinner, Seamus Butler. Sorry, I noticed your message too late, probably. Cool, so we can see these are going in properly. Expanding to the right size whenever we drop it in there. The ones in the big box are not doing the small thing like they're supposed to. So why is that? Oh, I wonder if it's because it should be multiplying it by a half. Maybe I forgot to save one of these files. That's possible. Let's make sure we saved it. Because this should call the base method. Oh, you know what? It's possible that challenge box has a different scale. Let's look at the 2x1. Yeah, 2x1 already shrinks it down, so this actually needs to be like 0.5 instead. Yeah, looks like it might need to be even smaller. Actually, no, these aren't being expanded yet. So let's get that thing expanding. I think that logic is in there for there's a special ability where you can put multiple dice in a single box, whereas the other one is just using that directly. So those are still being 65 by 65. So let's look at the dungeon panels challenge view and say, yeah, why don't you adjust layout settings and see how that works. Honestly, I'm not sure why that is an option there. I think it might be for other reasons, but so that is on, but we're still not getting those to be filling the space. But if I turn on that height, maybe I'll just turn that on here. Maybe it's not getting, that might not be getting changed in the code. So let's run this here. Layout can be a little tricky when you're using things for different elements. Okay, so yeah, so that's looking pretty good now. These are still not going in the right place, or they're not. I think the size might be okay. Maybe I want them to be a little smaller. Let's try 0.4 instead on the 2x1 for portrait here. Yeah, I guess if we want them to be like similar to landscape, that should be like 0.3 divided by 0.8, right? That would be the right scale. So because 0.8 is the scale on the regular challenge box, we want them to look similar. So 0.375, almost 0.4. Cool, but they're not, yeah, so I think what we're seeing here, they're not going together properly, and that's because there's a sort of hidden thing on this box that's saying where do those dice go? And if I get my inspector, yeah, we get this die grid, and you can see these are just 18 by 18. These are not being updated. These should have a different, you can see, actually you can sort of see, yeah, if I zoom in more, you can see they're like, because you can have a lot of dice. These should be being more dynamic based on the size of things. So I think these are these need to be bigger in portrait. So let's look at this challenge box. I'm just gonna, can I just look at the prefab and make a change in it? Maybe. Yeah, so the die grid, this is one sort of downside of the Unity layout thing. The cell size is like manual here, right? You can't like make this depend on something else. I do notice that the die grid here is not, you can see all the other ones are like percentage based, which is good for making things expand, whereas the die grid isn't. So I'm going to, can I do that on the prefab? No, I need to instantiate it and then do that. Okay, so let's put that prefab in. I want to just throw it in the main canvas, I think. Instantiate it here. Have a look at it. In the new version of Unity, there actually is a really nice prefab editor that you can jump right into a prefab, but you still have to do it the old way in the current version we're in right now. So yeah, I'm going to make the values of this more dynamic based on, you know, when we increase the size of the box. So that's good. So I'm going to do that on this challenge box. I'm going to do it on the 1x1 as well. Boop. And I'll apply those changes, and yeah, the empty challenge box doesn't do anything. Okay, so yeah, so the issue here is that we have this die grid and it has like a fixed cell size that we need to update if it's portrait. So what I'm going to do, save the project to make sure I've got those changes. In the challenge box view, I'm going to, yeah, one thing I'm going to do is this 65F, I don't like this being here. I'm going to see if it's referenced anywhere else too. No, but what I'm going to do is this 65 is pretty ingrained in the UI layout, so I'm going to add a constant in here about that. So I want to set up a constant that we can use to do this stuff. So it's a good place for that. Probably like around the animations and stuff like that. I'll put it in here. So box size landscape 65F and box size portrait. And then we can make a little public float box size. So basically, we can have a thing that will return. Why is this red? Oh, sure, static. And this will be 100F. So if we need any logic to deal with this, we can call this. So back here in this other thing that's like getting a size factor, this scaling should be. Yeah, so this is right. So this thing is doing exactly what we're talking about. The icon grid is scaling based on the height of the challenge box, but the other grid isn't. So, and this needs to be based on that constant. We're going to, instead of 65, we're going to use that constant here. Box size. Because those grid values are based on the landscape cell size, and so we need to adjust based on that. And this 24 is coming out of, I think that's another aspect of the icon grid thing. So I think here we also want, where's that dice grid? Is that? Oh, that's under die target, I think, right? Place die origin. I might need to go back and see where that is coming from. Yeah, so the die grid. So you see the icon grid. The default thing. Yeah, the default cell size is 24, but we want to scale it by that. And actually, yeah, that should probably be a property as well, not just a constant. I think it's 24 on both. So what we can do is we'll throw that in here so it can be updated later. Well, this is something more specific to the challenge box view. Icon grid base size, and instead of having that be a magic number in here, it's something we can change. Cool. So yeah, so that's making those icons not be super tiny. That scaling is happening for us here. And so we want to do the same thing on the dice grid thing. So let's go back and see where that's being set up. Cool. So in the 2x1 challenge box, yeah, the place die origin is like that's saying where we're placing the dice, and it's the grid. But I think, yeah, there's no reference to it as a grid here, right? Like we just put the dice in. So where does that get used? Yeah, it just like puts them in there. So I think we need to add a another property that lets us manage the scale of that grid as well, based on the what size the object is. So so what I'm going to do is add a property for the place die and make it and add a grid. So if we want to update the same way that we do for the icon grid. So let's go, and that's going to be on die target because that's something that there can be in several places. And I think we're going to need Unity engine.ui for this. Grid layout group, placed die grid. Cool, and then yeah, I think we're basically going to be the similar logic to the challenge box view here, where we scale it. So we could probably make a little helper method for this. So yeah, so let's public or protected maybe. You only need to use it internally. Update grid size. And we need to pass in a grid and the original size. And basically we can take this logic and generalize it and then use it in two places. So the size factor is going to be the same. The cell size is going to be based on this, and then we just update that. Cool. All right, and so then we can call, in here we can just call update grid size. Icon grid base size. Cool. And then on die target, I'm just gonna, we don't have an update method, I think, in there. We can do the same thing on the place die grid. And we need a property to remember what that original size was. This is something we could potentially grab and store, but I'm okay with just keeping it like this. And this is, I think, 18F normally. And we can, I think that's what it is generally, and we can specify it if we want to. We also might want to potentially adjust the spacing, but I think it's probably okay, the spacing. All right, so now we need to hook up that property. On this one, and excuse me, apply that, and on this one. So the 1x1, there is an effect that lets you put 2 dice in, so we do have a little grid there. We don't usually use it. We usually put the die directly on. Oh, and that is actually a different number, so we'll update that to be 24 on this prefab. All right, let's save that, and let's see how our dice look now on the white box. Assuming we did it right. All right, so looks like it's still a little off, and let's see what's happening there. Because the dice aren't there, but the grid will be there. We can click into it. So yeah, the cell size didn't get updated. So why is that? The icon grid, you can see the cell size is like bigger. It's not that. So why didn't this get updated? is the place die grid is there. Oh, you know what? Did I copy and paste into the wrong grid? No, that's right. That's weird. Why are we not getting that grid size updating? We've got connection here to the die grid. The die grid is 18 by 18. And I don't see why that wouldn't be working. We can throw a log in there. It'll log a lot, but and you can debug in here, but it can be annoying to do. So. Cell size 36, but it's not actually changing it. I'm getting that log, but I'm not getting it's not actually doing it. Oh wait, right, this is potentially the other one. Yeah, let's add in the make sure it's getting the right grid. That's the icon grids, I think, not the die grids. That's why debugging into that can be hard, because you'll get called so many times. We can collapse these logs to see cell size icon grid, cell size icon grid. Yeah, we're not getting it for the 2x1. Why is that? Is our update method not being called? Maybe. Oh, maybe this doesn't get called. You should get both of them should get called. What is going on? Well, die target update. This is when you get a little worried what's going on. And we'll throw in a log to that place die grid. It's the kind of thing you don't like to be doing. Like, why isn't my game working? Why isn't the update being called? Maybe it is being called. Maybe something weird is happening. I'm pretty sure Unity calls update on the superclass. Maybe it doesn't, but I thought it does. I'm not getting any logs out of that, so that is weird. I did save the file, obviously, like that. Here's where we go into Unity, update, superclass. maybe, yeah, I'm just really surprised because I thought this was. It will call. Okay, you do have to call the base class, I guess. I don't know if I've never. We don't actually use the update a lot in our stuff. We use it here because of how the layout code works. So we need to do it on the update. Oh yeah, will not be executing the child class. Yeah, I guess you have to call base. All right, that's no big deal. I don't think that's ever come up. And then here we need to call base. That's fine. That is how C# works. I just thought Unity did something different. I don't think that really affects. Yeah, we just don't use the update a whole lot in our stuff, so it might just have never come up in any of the games yet. And we don't often subclass mono behaviors as well. I mean, we do, but not in things that use update, I guess. All right, so now we're getting logs for that, and the die grid now has a better cell size. It's still the spacing actually needs to be better. So maybe we need to also update the spacing. So we can do that though, because and I'm wondering if we should, instead of specifying these, we can like store them. Maybe we'll do that because there's going to be more things for the grid size. So let's do that. So we'll say we'll make this protected in case anyone is interested. Original placed die cell size, and this is actually a vector 2, and spacing. And we'll actually call this update grid from scale, maybe. And this needs to take actually vector 2 original cell size and vector 2 original spacing. You can say cell spacing, sure. And so here we need to go, the cell size can be size vector times original cell size. It's fine for it to be a vector. You can multiply that by float, and we can just do this. We don't need to store a variable here. And cell spacing, I guess we can, if we call this, we'll call it similar to the thing, size factor times original spacing, and get rid of that. So that's kind of annoying. So here in virtual void awake, before anything happens, we want to record these things. So basically, like if we'll do a null check here because not everything is going to have this. Original. We'll just record these values so we can use them for the scaling later. So this kind of trick is something we use in games a lot. Record sort of the original value and then update it. So we don't have to, have the separate prefabs, and we can change something once. And cell size, original spacing. Definitely something an argument could be made like, I'm doing enough work here, we probably could have just made another prefab, but it's happening. And cool. Scale the grid. Yeah, maybe I'll put this comment on this method instead. All right, and so that's good, and then can get rid of that log now. So then we need to update the other, and we can get rid of this because we're going to use these properties instead. And this is the icon grid. We don't need this icon grid base size anymore because we're going to be using it. Original icon cell size and original icon spacing. And yeah, original icon cell size, original icon spacing. And yeah, and we need to have a wake method that calls the base and does the same, basically the same logic on the icon grid. To remember the original size. All right, now it's gonna adjust both the spacing and the size for us. And let's see if that was all worth it. And that might be probably it for today because it's getting, yeah, it's already 3 Eastern. Just got right into it. All right, so what do we have? Looks like the icon stuff worked still, but the challenge, the dice, maybe the dice are just too big. Let's see. I want to see that things happened. So spacing got updated on, looks like the spacing is updated and the size on that, as well as on this, but maybe the dice are just too big. If I look at the grid and where things are, they look like they're spaced out right. So maybe the dice are just a little too big. Let's try scaling them down a little bit. On the portrait scale. Let's try just putting 0.3 as well and see. And maybe we'll, you know, add another adjustment factor in or something like that for that if they're too small. Yeah, so what it's doing is it's putting them in that space. I feel like maybe they're not going in the right place, but like the second one should be there. It shouldn't be like, oh, maybe it is there. We can do a scale thing here. It's hard to control where this scale goes though. Boop. Yeah, I mean maybe that's all right. I just want those dice to be bigger, I think, though. That's working out in portrait, but it's not, or in landscape, but it's not really working out. Like if I make the dice even smaller, then of course they'll work, but yeah, so there they are. They're super tiny. And you know, maybe I put 0.25, they'll all fit, but that's like, they don't need to be that small, right? Like if you look at where they are in portrait, they are working fine. So I'm curious why my scaling logic is not, like the scaling logic should work fine at 0.375 based on everything. So I'm just curious about what's going on there. let's look at those. Do those have like a, yeah, the pivot's in the middle. And like, you know, if you look at them in the scene, we would think we would get, you know, how many across here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 across. Let's just put 6 dice on there and see. I think I might have enough and see where they end up here. Yeah, well, I have, oh, and now the die, okay, so something's, it is doing right, but they're not going in the right place when we load the game. If I take it off, oh yeah, then they're fine. So something is getting mixed up there. You know what it is? They're getting put there before that adjustment happens. That's what's going on. That's what's going on. They're, okay. So yeah, if we look at the place die origin, there's this method called get place die location, which the dice box, which controls the dice, is doing that, and it's putting the dice there before the layout is finished. And so that's actually something when we load the game, you can see when the game is running, it's fine. So it's only when we're loading the game. So we need to basically allow that to lay out before I want to like find, there's a place where we like wait for everything to lay out before we put the dice on the screen. I know it's gonna probably, yeah, let's go to the initialization stuff. So usually it's towards the top. Yeah, start game. There's a method. This is all like the debug stuff. Display game. So yeah, this is a coroutine, so we can wait for things. So yeah, we're setting up the dice boxes, we're setting up the panels. Yeah, we're waiting a frame, but maybe we need to wait longer. Maybe we wait 2 frames. Because here, this is here where we're adding placed dice. But let's wait 2 frames. Sometimes it takes a couple of frames before things get late, because we need that start method to run, right? Or sorry, the update method to run and move the grid to the right spot. But we can't move it to the right spot until the layout has updated based on, you know, where things are on the screen. So sound suddenly disappeared and I can hear you again. Okay, hopefully I'm back. There we go. Look at that. Just waiting for one little fraction of a second, allow things to lay out, and those dice are looking to be where I want them to be. If I make one more heroic, oh, you see here we don't have the scale set up right on this control. We'll fix that for portrait, so it's doing the wrong thing. You can see we get 6 dice going across nicely. This is not ideal play here, obviously, but you can see that the dice are going across in the way that we want, and that looks good. We can probably fix that heroic die converter to say, yeah, place die scale is 0.4 on landscape, maybe 0.5. We'll see what the size it looks like and adjust that. Let's pop a die in and see. I'll just put more, yes, that's still a little big. It might be just the same. Try 0.4. Yeah, I think just the same. It's fine. Okay. Cool. So yeah. So I think we accomplished a bit here today. We got the challenge boxes to be the right size on portrait and laid out in a nice way. We got the dice to be showing up in the right way, how we want them on those challenge boxes, especially the small ones, which can be a little tricky. And yeah, everything is starting to move forward a little more again here. So So I hope this illustrates a little bit about, some of the challenges of designing a UI for the phone that sort of integrates, without having to rewrite things or do a whole lot of extra work, or duplicate resources and stuff like that. You still have to deal with some dynamic things and be a little clever about it, but you can get away with a lot of things without having to rewrite a lot of stuff. And we have still some way to go before the phone UI is ready, but we're making great progress, and we're looking forward to getting you playing it on your phone very soon. I think that's going to be it for today, since that ended up taking quite a while. And but yeah, we'll be back hopefully next week with another dev stream. Actually, I'll show you some of those. I promised to show you some animations that I didn't do that. Let me do that. We'll run through not quite a whole game or anything, but a bit of a turn before I sign off here. If there's any questions, feel free to toss them in the chat before I sign off here. So let's run through the start of a turn here. As you can see, this is actually jumping into the third floor. These challenge boxes, will probably make those a little bigger as well. But maybe not to the full 100 size. We'll see. And yeah, we open a door. We use that animation scene. We have a little bit of different sequence there because we zoom it up to the image and then we flip it over. You can see the peril challenge boxes are not being expanded properly here. That's something I'm going to have to look at. But you see that animation of coming in, and you can always, if you're curious, want to look at the artwork, you can pop up the full card if you like. So yeah, so looks like we have a little bit more work to do with perils and so on, but things are moving along and we have a good direction here. So looks like there's no questions, so I'm going to sign off. Thanks for watching, as always, and tune into our other streams on the regular. We will see you next time.